What if I told you there was a man who physically couldn't stop winning NBA championships? From winning 5 rings as the most accurate shooter of all time, to then creating a dynasty and winning 4 championships as one of the best coaches in NBA history, it seemed like Steve Kerr turned everything he touched into gold. But what was his secret to becoming so unbeatable as both a player and coach? And how did he manage to stay on top throughout 4 different decades? Well, to find out, we have to go back to 1988 when a University of Arizona player would begin his iconic NBA career. From his college days to his time in the NBA, Kerr carved out a niche as the ultimate role player. But his impact on the game was anything but ordinary. At Arizona, Kerr showed flashes of the player he'd become in the pro leagues. He wasn't the fastest or the strongest, but he had a killer instinct from three-point land and was obsessively competitive, something that would allow him to get punched in the face one day by Michael Jordan. There has never been a coach with the success Kerr has who also had equal or more success as a player. But then how exactly did this transition occur where this player would never stop having success even as a coach? Well, firstly, his shooting touch was something special, and it caught the eye of NBA scouts. But Kerr's path to the pros wasn't easy. Despite having his jersey retired at Arizona, he went near the end of the draft in 1988, picked by the Phoenix Suns, and he was simply average, or worse than average. Many wondered if he'd even remain in the league. He bounced around between teams early on in his career, playing for the Cavaliers, the Magic, and getting very few playing minutes. However, that would all change when he landed with the Chicago Bulls in 1993. This is where his career would take off. Phil Jackson's triangle offense, evolved from Tex Winter's, was designed for everyone to have an equal opportunity to touch the ball and contribute. The seeds of Kerr's coaching future were sowed this same season. However, Michael Jordan needed a break and had gone to play baseball for a while. Without him, the Bulls were not able to win titles, but they were still competitive, and Kerr's minutes greatly increased overall. And as such, so did his three-point shooting amount and accuracy. When Jordan unretired, Kerr found his perfect role alongside him and Scottie Pippen. He wasn't asked to create his own shot or defend the opponent's best player. Instead, Kerr had one job: knock down open threes and hit his shots, believe in the triangle, trust his teammates and coach. And yes, he delivered. Kerr led the league in three-point shooting percentage in 1995 with a ridiculous 52.4% clip. No, we didn't have the volume of today, but the accuracy was still ridiculous. He followed that up by shooting 51.5% from deep the next year. These weren't just good numbers, they were historically great. Kerr's ability to space the floor was crucial to the Bulls' second three-peat from 1996 to 1998. Without this laser on the outside, Michael Jordan would go back to having a really rough time against those defenses. The triangle with Kerr would deliver. But Kerr's time with the Bulls wasn't all smooth. In 1995, during a particularly intense practice, Michael Jordan punched Kerr in the face. It was a shocking moment that could have gone many directions. Instead, it became a turning point. Kerr stood up to Jordan, earning the respect of his notoriously competitive teammate. From that moment on, Jordan trusted Kerr in big moments. Even Phil Jackson would comment positively on this later. The moment of awakening helped Michael become a compassionate leader and ultimately helped transform the team into one of the greatest of all time. It would also be a weird foreshadowing for Kerr in his coaching career. For now though, Michael Jordan got to know his teammates, that set the NBA record for regular season success at 72-10 in 1996 and won the title. And his trust for Kerr specifically, this would pay off in the 1997 finals. With the Bulls up 3-2 and Game 6 on the line, Jordan drew a double team and kicked the ball out to Kerr. Immediately and without hesitation, Kerr drilled the game-winning shot. This would secure another championship for the Bulls. It was a defining moment. It was the defining moment of Kerr's playing career. He was not just a role player along for the ride, and despite perception, Michael Jordan did need his team in order to win all his championships. Even in the 1998 finals in Game 2, it was Steve Kerr that gave the Bulls life. This time he would miss his three-point shot, but would hustle to secure the rebound, pass it out to MJ, who would give the Bulls the lead. They would tie the series 1-1, and I think we all know what happened later on in Game 6 on their way to a three-peat. Most players dream of 3 rings. Kerr dreamt of more. After leaving Chicago via trade when they blew up the organization basically, Kerr joined the San Antonio Spurs, where he continued his winning ways. He played a key role in the Spurs' 1999 championship, even in a reduced role, but maintaining his same purpose: an off-the-bench shooter and spark. He also had that authority and leadership from his time with the Bulls. However, it was in his final season as a player that he saved the Spurs' hope for another championship. Facing Don Nelson's vicious Dallas Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals, Kerr would come off the bench and hit 3 3-pointers in a row with the game tied at 71.
Steve Kerr with another three.
He was in his final season, but this spark would send the Spurs to the finals, where he would reach his 5th championship as a player, and all in an 8-year period. He just couldn't stop winning, and he became the only player since the 1960 Celtics to win 4 straight NBA titles in a row. He'd also end his career with the highest 3-point shooting percentage in history, and that stands until this day. And while yes, some of you are thinking, but that was on low volume, it was, but he still had to come in and shoot when it was required. Even Curry compliments him for this record, and Kerr still brings up the fact that Curry has obviously shot a lot more. But now that he was retired, Kerr's impact went beyond his shooting ability. He was a student of the game, soaking up knowledge from legendary coaches like Phil Jackson and Greg Popovich. Kerr watched how Jackson managed superstar egos and built a winning culture in Chicago. With the Spurs, he saw Popovich's attention to detail and emphasis on system basketball, an almost unfair exposure to coaching knowledge, to be honest. His playing style was the definition of efficiency. He knew his role, and he played it to perfection. He didn't try to do too much or play outside his strengths. This self-awareness made him invaluable to championship teams, and something as a coach he would make use of. He would move into broadcasting and front office work while his children would grow up. He also served as a general manager of the Phoenix Suns, gaining valuable experience in team building and player evaluation. But the sidelines were calling, and in 2014, Kerr would answer. As a coach for the Warriors, Kerr brought together everything he'd learned from his playing days to a young team that were one of the top defensive teams in the league, but who had a very mediocre offense. His coaching philosophy was a blend of old school fundamentals and modern analytics. What was the magic formula that allowed this career role player to outsmart the league's top coaches and build an unstoppable offense and defensive juggernaut? And how did Kerr translate his own playing experience into an NBA dominating program? Well, firstly, it all comes down to his ability to blend different coaching styles. Kerr's knowledge of Jackson's systems and Popovich's systems allowed him to create a hybrid system. This alone is not a tactic though, and it doesn't unlock his own secret coaching power. Steve Kerr envisioned an offense built on constant movement, quick decision-making, and unselfish play. Even though they had Steph Curry, the Warriors before Kerr were a sluggish scoring team, but their previous coach's emphasis on defense had made them formidable in that area. So Kerr didn't have to touch that, only streamline it, make it more efficient, but the offense, that needed an entire rework. The Warriors were obviously filled with potential, but a lot was holding them back, and Steve Kerr saw it immediately. Their offense was stagnant, predictable, and far from maximizing their incredible talents. That's why when people think coaches don't do anything even though it's a players' league, they're often wrong. As a new head coach in 2014 and a rookie head coach, Kerr faced a daunting challenge. How could he transform a team that had won 51 games in the previous season into true championship contenders? As always, the 50-win threshold is an indicator that you're ready, but actually going over the hump, a different story entirely. The key to Kerr's new system was ball movement, with every player on the court becoming a threat to score or make a play. This approach was obviously tailor-made for Stephen Curry, but instead of using him as a simple pick-and-roll point guard, Kerr unleashed him as an off-ball nightmare for defenses. Curry would sprint around screens, cut hard to the basket, and relocate for open threes, all while the defense scrambled to keep up. But how did Kerr convince his players to buy in this new style, and how did he convince them to have their best player not hold the ball?
We were looking at Steve like he was out of his mind. I mean, this guy is preaching ball movement and, hey, Steph, don't hold the ball, swing the ball. I mean, he's like, move the ball, move the ball. Like, he's like, pass the ball, pass the ball. So I asked him early on, you keep telling us to swing the ball, but how's Steph Curry and Klay going to get shots? Because those are the guys that have to get the shots. And he said, the ball will always find the guys who's supposed to get the shots. And sure enough, as we bought into the system that he was bringing to it, the ball always found Steph. It always found Klay.
Kerr's vision extended beyond just Curry. He saw untapped potential in Draymond Green, a second-round pick who had shown flashes but was stuck low on the depth chart. Kerr made a bold decision to start Green at power forward instead of small forward, using his passing skills to facilitate the offense and be a great pick-and-roll guy for Stephen Curry when they needed it. When young teams are improving and you make big changes, experts around the league tend to raise their eyebrows. However, it proved to be a stroke of genius. Also because Draymond's defense was incredible, evidenced by his award in 2017. Kerr's offense also heavily used elements from his playing days. He implemented aspects of the triangles offense he learned under Phil Jackson, as well as the motion principles from Greg Popovich. And this hybrid offense became so unpredictable and adaptable, it was nearly impossible to defend when firing on all cylinders, which, let's be honest, it almost always was. What made the system truly special, though, was how it maximized the strength of every player. Kerr knew what it was like to be unused as a player, to be forgotten and not actually maximized. He also knew what it was like to be brought off the bench, to have a specific job and to succeed at it. And as such, Klay Thompson also thrived, and Andre Iguodala's basketball IQ off the bench shone in a system that prioritized quick reads and smart passes. Even Andrew Bogut, known primarily for his big man defense, became one of the best facilitators in the league. But making these moves as a coach, you need to do it with empathy, and that's something that Kerr did with Iguodala as well. To this day, he understands it.
You set the tone, 7, 8 years ago when I first became coach and I asked you to come off the bench. You had never come off the bench for a single game. You had played like 1,000 NBA games or something. Never come off the bench. And I asked you what you thought about it, and you were not thrilled about it. And I knew all that. And so I felt like this made a lot of sense, but it was a hard thing to bring to you, Andre. It was not easy because I was a brand new coach and you were an all-star and an Olympian. And so that was kind of my first test as a coach.
In addition to his offensive systems, where many coaches fail, is culture. How would Kerr solve this problem with such a talented team, especially when you're moving parts around all the time? Well, it all comes down to Kerr's emphasis on joy. He believed that basketball should be fun, and he encouraged his players to enjoy the game. However, that was only one of Kerr's 4 values that he instills as the culture. The other 3 are competitive, mindfulness, and compassion. If you didn't know that Kerr played for Phil Jackson, you would now. He said, "I wanted to be able to establish what we were looking to do as a team, our goals and where I saw each play fitting in before we even got to the practice floor. And him coming in with his core philosophies ready to go, with his culture set ready to go, well, the results were absolutely outrageous. In Kerr's first season as head coach, the Warriors won 67 games, a 16-game improvement from the previous year. They went from a good team to an offensive juggernaut almost overnight. There were even articles in the early stages of this season questioning how he'd already done this and how good the Warriors were looking. Could his success, though, just be chalked up to having great players? Was he just lucky? Like how I would be lucky if you considered subscribing to the GOAT Authority? While Kerr has said he was fortunate, there are countless incredible teams in history with some of the greatest players ever, and they have not won championships. That's because he was humble enough to recognize the talent he had and to learn the lessons of both Jackson and Pop.
I mean, I was so blessed to play for the greatest coaches ever, Phil Jackson and Greg Popovich, Lenny Wilkins, Coach Lute Olson in college. I mean, all Hall of Famers. And Lenny and Phil and Pop in the NBA in particular were all collaborators. And that's really what I learned from them was that, number one, you're only as good as your players in the NBA. But number two, if you do have players, then you got to collaborate with them and figure it out as a group.
The truth is, even in this quotation, Kerr is being humble. The Warriors' offense went from last in passes per game to leading the league in assists while being top 10 in passes completed. And while they didn't become number 1 overnight in passes per game, it was definitely the most efficient passing team in the league in terms of scoring. And in turn, this gave them the second highest offensive rating in the league, from mediocre to the league best. And this team's success wasn't just on offense either. They improved spacing and movement, created better transition opportunities, leading to a league best defensive rating as well. But perhaps the most impressive aspect of Kerr's overhaul was how quickly the players bought in. Stars like Curry and Thompson embraced their new roles, recognizing that the system would ultimately make them more dangerous. The team's chemistry was evident on the court, with players making extra passes and celebrating each other's success. Kerr's impact went far beyond just rolling out the ball and letting his stars play. His skills had been developed to the point he was the only person who could do this, with the only team who could execute it. It was almost like the previous 30 years of Kerr's career had arrived at this moment. But how could Kerr handle the pressure of now coaching a team with such high expectations after such a dominant regular season? And what else would the rookie head coach have to learn in order to continue his natural talent with winning championships? Kerr obviously had a secret weapon. Curry was already an elite shooter when Kerr took over, but the new coach saw ways to make him even more dangerous. The new system perfectly suited Curry's skill set. He encouraged him to take shots other coaches might consider ill-advised, recognizing that Curry's range extended far beyond the traditional three-point line. And because Curry didn't have to have the ball in his hands the whole time to get his shots, the freedom allowed him to flourish in ways no one had seen before. He began routinely pulling up from 30 feet out, forcing defenses to guard him as soon as he crossed the half court. The gravity opened up opportunities for his teammates, creating a domino effect that made the entire offense more potent. And the 2015 playoffs would be the ultimate proving ground for these philosophies. The regular season dominance was one thing, but the playoffs were where the system had to hold up under the stress of a championship. Could a team built on constant ball movement and unselfish play survive when the game slowed down, and when defensive schemes were designed to punish finesse? Well, the Warriors stormed through the West, dismantling the Pelicans, surviving a physical battle with the Grizzlies, and defeating the Rockets in the conference finals. The real test, however, came in the NBA Finals against LeBron James and the injury-depleted Cavaliers. It was here that Kerr made the boldest coaching decision of his young career. Down 2-1 in the series, he pulled the starting center Andrew Bogut and instead inserted Andre Iguodala into the lineup, going smaller, faster, and fully embracing the offensive identity he had built all season. This new Warriors death lineup to close games out would show his ability to adapt, which most coaches take years to kind of get under their belt, but he would do it in the NBA Finals. He wasn't afraid to pull that trigger. Sign of a great coach. The Warriors ran the Cavaliers off the floor, winning 3 straight games and capturing their first championship in 40 years. And all of this is fantastic, but it was only the beginning, and Kerr wasn't here just to win once. If there's one thing we know about his career, he physically couldn't do that. The following season, the Warriors came out of the gates on fire, winning their first 24 games in a row, the best start in NBA history. As the wins piled up, though, many considered whether this team could challenge the 95-96 Chicago Bulls record of 72 wins. Kerr, who had been a part of that Bulls team, knew how difficult these sorts of challenges were for teams trying to win titles. The regular season became a nightly spectacle. Curry was playing at an otherworldly level, routinely hitting shots that seemed impossible, or better yet, are impossible for everyone but Curry, and the Warriors were blowing out good teams, great teams, coming back from huge deficits and finding ways to win even on their off nights. Every game became a measuring stick on whether this team deserved to be considered the greatest of all time. Kerr had not only to manage the physical toll of chasing the record with the minutes, but also the mental strain it put on his players to not only focus on the championship, but also this regular season record. Thanks to his system, thanks to his coaching, and thanks to his players' talent, the Warriors did it. They finished the regular season 73-9, breaking the Bulls' record and cementing their place in NBA history. It was not only the talent on the team, but also Kerr's coaching ability. He had taken a good team and turned them into an all-time great one in just 2 years. But here's the thing, he'd win Coach of the Year for the season, deserved, but he had missed a lot of time due to his health at the beginning of the year. This led many to question the award, but as any good leader knows, what happened here speaks to the systems that Kerr put in place and the culture he has instilled in his team. It was his program, his leadership, and his strategies. But the job wasn't finished. That was just a regular season. The Warriors still had to go through the playoffs and have another shot to really match the 1996 Bulls at greatness. They would get through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs with relatively no trouble, and then they would face a few struggles in the Western Conference Finals, falling behind 3-1 to an elite Oklahoma City Thunder team, led by Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. However, Kerr's coaching, his key adjustments, and Klay Thompson's legendary Game 6 performance would help spark one of the greatest comebacks in NBA history. The Warriors would take over and win the series in 7 games. But oh, what the future would hold. In the NBA Finals, they faced LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Again, the Warriors took a 3-1 lead, seemingly on the verge of capping off the historic season with another title. But again, the unthinkable happened.
Iguodala up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. LeBron James with the rejection. It's over. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
They had now made history for the wrong reasons. Although at this point, LeBron James was an absolute beast, and in the words of Magic Johnson, we never take anything away from a winner. Injury, suspensions, no. Even in defeat, the Warriors had still changed the game. They'd still gotten the regular season record. Their style of play, emphasizing three-point shooting and positionless basketball that Don Nelson dreamed of, would influence teams across the league for years to come. This was still the way forward for the league. The loss was devastating, but Kerr's response showed why he was such an effective leader. He didn't panic, he didn't overreact, and instead he used the defeat as motivation, challenging his players to come back stronger the next season. And in a weird way, it was also Kerr's first ever loss in the finals as a player or a coach. The thing is, they did come back stronger. Now in the offseason, the Warriors made a move that shocked the NBA, managing to get Kevin Durant even though they just defeated him in the Western Conference Finals. And all this did for Kerr was basically say, how do you integrate another superstar into the system? And could he maintain that beautiful, unselfish style of play with so much individual talent on the roster? He suddenly had Phil Jackson problems. And because he was a student of Phil Jackson, Kerr's ability to manage egos and get the stars to buy into a team-first mentality was something he was ridiculously qualified to do. The addition of Durant made the Warriors nearly unstoppable. He emphasized to his team throughout that they didn't need to sacrifice their style to accommodate Durant either. They just needed to play their game and let his talents naturally fit in. Despite an overwhelming talent gap, Kerr had to ensure that this entire trio coexisted without sacrificing the Warriors' core identity. We've seen this even with Miami and LeBron James. It takes time to get acclimated. And from the outside in, it did look easy, which again speaks to Kerr's systems and culture. This 2016-17 season saw the Warriors dominate the league even more than they were already dominating the league. They won 67 games this time though, with the #1 most efficient offense and the #2 most efficient defense, narrowly missing being first for both as Kerr's Bulls had done in 1996. They tore through the playoffs, going 16-1 and capturing their second championship in 3 years. Yes, they would face the Cleveland Cavaliers yet again. It was all seeming a little bit too easy at this point. The ball movement remained, but now the Warriors had the ultimate failsafe. They could always just give the ball to Durant and let him go to work. Or, let Curry shoot and bail them out. The reason it looks this way is because his coaching philosophy continued to emphasize joy, something he has brought forward even into his Olympic coaching days now. He encourages players to celebrate good plays, to enjoy the process of improvement, and this approach fostered a culture of competitiveness that helped the team stay focused throughout the long grind of regular seasons when you're destroying everybody. And that's important because they would go on to win another championship in 2018, even if the Houston Rockets would be the top seed and almost defeat them. That team was stacked, and in Game 7 missed a record 27 three-pointers in a row. That series was the closest moment for Kerr to potentially lose out on making his dynasty, and the Houston Rockets were really close to winning that Game 7, with Mike D'Antoni, who already started playing high-tempo, positionless basketball back in the 2000s, trying his best to win his championship as well. Sadly, it was not to be, and NBA history would look at Golden State with 3 titles in 4 years as one of the greatest dynasties. Kerr was also the fastest coach to win 200 wins in NBA history, and he had now never experienced a season as a coach without reaching the NBA Finals. He physically couldn't stop winning, and the craziest offense ever had carried Curry and the Warriors to incredible success. But as we know, maintaining that level of success isn't easy. Injuries, fatigue, and the pressure of being the league's top target begins to take its toll, and the challenge now was for Kerr finding ways to keep his team motivated and fresh, both physically and mentally. He was also about to face his greatest test yet. Could Kerr succeed in achieving a three-peat like his mentor Phil Jackson? And would the Warriors be able to achieve a level of dominance not seen since the 1960s Celtics? There is always a battle of time versus dynasties, and 2019 season was a roller coaster. They started strong as they do, but cracks began to show as the year wore on. Injuries had piled up and the team's depth was stretched thin. They would get the first seed in the Western Conference though this time, and they would beat the Clippers 4-2 in the first round. They would then get revenge on the struggle against Houston by beating them relatively easily 4-2 in the second round. And by the time they got to the conference finals against Portland, Damian Lillard and the Trailblazers would give them a little bit of a fight. But thanks to Curry's 37-point triple-double, they would win in a sweep. No Kevin Durant due to an injury, so it's not like they had the super team with them to get to the finals. Nonetheless, still a pretty good team because they had one without him. And even though it seemed they were ramping up, they just weren't quite in peak form. They would face off against Kawhi Leonard as well as the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors played well and defended Curry, led by Nick Nurse's janky, as Steph called it, box-and-one defense. And it wasn't just injuries that were creating issues. The Raptors were outplaying them, plain and simple. Kevin Durant would go down with an Achilles tear in Game 5 after missing the start of the series. Klay Thompson would have some injuries here and there, but would play every game until he tore his ACL in Game 6. The long 5-year stretch of reaching the finals, as well as a team finally stacked and ready to counter them, led to the Raptors and Nick Nurse taking control, Kawhi Leonard getting Finals MVP, and they would finish them off in Game 6. They had suffocating defense, balanced offense, it exposed the Warriors' weaknesses that they had, and the dynasty would end. But unlike in 2016 where they got bailed out by a signing of a superstar, the Warriors would now enter a period of uncertainty. Kerr knew that the landscape of the NBA had changed thanks to Curry and his offense. And when Durant decided to leave to go to Brooklyn and Thompson's long-term injury took him out of the lineup, the Warriors were no longer clear-cut favorites for the first time in many years. So how can Kerr keep a team of winners focused on their goals after such a devastating defeat? And how could the coach who physically couldn't stop winning find a way to win against these odds? Kerr's approach in the years after 2019 was all about experimentation, while maintaining his core coaching philosophies and ideas throughout, and why wouldn't you, they are what made him a winner for the past 20 years, he focused instead on player development. Not something that he'd had to worry about up until this point, but giving more opportunities to young talents like Jordan Poole and James Wiseman. Like in the 2015 finals, he would not be afraid to figure out a best lineup and a best system for the team that he had. But sadly for him, that Warriors team struggled mightily in the 2019-2020 season, finishing with the worst record in the league. Injuries continued to plague them, with Steph Curry missing most of the season due to a broken hand. Instead of figuring out how to balance egos and superstars, he was managing a young team and keeping them motivated through countless losses. But here's the thing, one of Coach's greatest strengths is his ability to build relationships with players off the court. He's not just a coach, he becomes a mentor and a friend. He makes this point to connect with his players on this personal level, to understand their motivations, concerns, and how to maximize them as a human as well as a player. And this approach allows him to keep tailoring his coaching style to whatever team he has, and to get the best out of the roster, very much like Phil Jackson used to do. Kerr also empowers his players to take ownership of the team's success. He's not a dictator on the sidelines. Instead, he encourages player input and their creativity.
We come in, we have a few suggestions, and whether those suggestions, I think the thing that I can always appreciate as a player is like, whether we go with that suggestion or not, it's heard, it's carefully thought out, and it's like, okay, here's what we're going to do, and here's why. It's never turned on deaf ears, whether it's we go with it or not.
And this was especially crucial during this down year when the team needed to find new ways to win without necessarily winning games. But even the best coaches face these conflicts and disagreements within teams, and the most notable incident for Kerr during this period was the Draymond Green punch. In 2022, Green struck his teammate Jordan Poole during a practice disagreement. It was a moment that could have torn the team apart, but Kerr's handling of the situation showed his leadership skills from the inside, not from the outside, as everybody thought he was always allowing Draymond to get away with things.
This is the biggest crisis that we've ever had since I've been coach here. It's really serious stuff. No matter what decision you make in a situation like this, it's not going to be perfect. Everything that you can think of, all the different combinations that are possible to have in a conversation, we've had them. It's been an exhaustive process.
While Green was fined and was forced to step away from the team for a while, Kerr's approach was firm but focused on accountability, and at the same time, he had first-hand experience of, being punched in the face at practice. But throughout this, the Warriors and Kerr never lost sight of the team's identity. Their style of play, the ball movement, the three-point shooting, the defensive intensity, all of this remained intact as much as possible. And Kerr's leadership during this period laid the groundwork for a resurgence no one expected to see. With Thompson finally returning from countless injuries, the team of young players that had developed over the years, and Curry healthy and ready to go, the Warriors were ready to compete once again. Could the coach prove that he truly couldn't stop himself from the ability to compete for championships? Would this team, without the same raw talent and star power of the Durant teams, find a different way to win? After missing the playoffs for 2 straight years, Golden State entered the season with no real expectations. But because Kerr was good at squeezing every ounce of potential from his roster, this would be pretty important as they developed a young version of the team and an aging version of the team. As the regular season began, the Warriors showed flashes of their former brilliance, starting the year 18-2, and with Kerr saying, "Hey, I felt like we could compete with anybody." However, despite a rough ending to the season, they finished as the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. While not the dominant force they once were, it was clear that this team still had some fight left in them, with Curry being very motivated. It is worth noting that Kerr's perspectives on championships teams were as follows.
Bulls, Spurs, and Warriors, all three are great two-way teams. Like you can't win a championship without being a great two-way team.
While amazingly their offensive rating had dipped to simply middle of the pack this season, they had tied for the best defensive rating in the league. All they needed was to get healthy as much as they could and go on a run. They had added some great players like Otto Porter Jr. and Gary Payton II to give much-needed depth and versatility and a little bit of defensive feistiness. But perhaps the most significant factor obviously was the resurgence of Klay Thompson. After 2.5 years on the sidelines due to devastating injuries and clearly not being the same player, his presence still injected new life into the team. As the playoffs began, very few considered the Warriors genuine title contenders, but Kerr's team had a secret weapon. And as the coach himself put it, the team was so connected all year. The Warriors' playoff run was not so dominant, but very clean, taking the first round 4-1 versus the Nuggets, 4-2 against a strong Grizzlies team, and the Western Conference Finals would be the biggest challenge against Phoenix. Fortunately, the top-seeded Suns fell to the Dallas Mavericks, giving the Warriors a better matchup. The result, a 4-1 victory, back to the finals after a 2-year absence of even making the playoffs. The 2022 NBA Finals tested Steve Kerr. The Warriors were down 2-1 against a physically dominant Boston Celtics team, and Kerr had seen this before: the need for adjustments, and the need to pull the right switches just as Phil Jackson had done with the Bulls, and just as Pop had done with the Spurs. It was time for Kerr, as he had done throughout his career, to outplay his opponent coach one more time. In Game 4, Kerr powerfully benched Draymond Green during key fourth-quarter moments, opting for Kevon Looney's size and rebounding to keep the offense flowing. Defensively, Kerr tasked Andrew Wiggins with shadowing Jason Tatum one-on-one, reducing the need to send other defenders to help and forcing Tatum into inefficient shooting and also a record 100 turnovers in the playoffs. Chef Curry drops an all-time Game 4 masterpiece, 43 points, 10 rebounds, and hits dagger threes to will the Warriors to a 107-97 victory. Sadly, he would go the opposite direction in the next game, making 0 3-pointers. But in Game 5, Kerr refused to panic and instead trusted the young part of his team to step up, and Wiggins did with 26 points and 13 rebounds. He leaned into GP2's defensive energy, tightening up Boston's backcourt, and kept challenging his team in film sessions, emphasizing their ball movement and speed, always keeping them focused on playing with joy and confidence and ignoring the pressure. And because they were up 3-2 and he knew his team was primed for the title, one more piece of motivation.
We're going to get this in Boston.
Yes, sir.
We're going to finish this in Boston, okay?
The Warriors responded by winning 3 straight games, ending the series with a dominant 103-90-point victory in Game 6. For Steph Curry, this championship run held special significance. Despite his numerous accolades, he'd never won Finals MVP, but this time there was absolutely no doubt. Curry's incredible performances, particularly in crucial moments, solidified his legacy as one of the greatest to ever play the game. All this with Kerr saying, it's the only thing left for him. He hadn't won Finals MVP even though he was great in previous finals. We all felt so happy for him. It was a full circle moment for a franchise that had gone from underdogs to dynasty. Then from dynasty to the worst record in the league, back to winning again, all in 2 seasons. And for Kerr, his 9th championship ring. He admitted that it was the most unlikely of the 4 championships he had won as a coach, saying it lacked the inevitability that surrounded their titles during the Kevin Durant era when winning felt almost expected. It also seemed to answer the question of whether Kerr was simply lucky for having great teams. Now that he'd won in 2015 as well as 2022, it showed his skill as a coach, not only to manage the blend of Warriors' established stars with a new generation of talent, but he was also able to keep the core identity and culture throughout this entire run. A delicate balance that very few coaches are able to achieve. And along with the ego management of the superstar years with Kevin Durant, the Warriors celebrated their 4th title in 8 years, and Steve Kerr now has the highest winning percentage in history for a coach in the playoffs, and is one of only 4 men in the entire history of the league to have at least 9 titles, along with Pat Riley, Phil Jackson, and Red Auerbach. With his offense and teams revolutionizing the NBA, encouraging ball movement and 3-point shooting, how does Kerr stack up against the all-time coaching greats? Well, his career is not over. The Warriors are in transition. Their core is aging while young talent develops. All of this will depend on Kerr and how he balances win-now expectations with building for the future. Much like the coach who knew how to build things slowly before destroying dynasties. Click to see how Chuck Daly took over the NBA and became the most feared coach ever.